All right, let's get going. Let's start with there's meetings going on. Stoltenberg's running off at the mouth, but he's saying, what we're hearing. There's unity. General Miley says the Russians are losing in all phases. I mean, they're doing the pro forma stuff of the stuff they have to say. But what do you think about it?
Well, these meetings took place ironically on February 14th, Valentine's Day, and I look at these meetings and I look at Ukraine, and I mean, I just feel for Ukraine because it's like the girl that's been waiting a long time for her suitor to step up to the plate, and give her the ring and commit. And there's the big date, Valentine's Day, and she's ready, and all she gets is hot air and excuses, baby. There ain't no ring. There might be a ring in a couple months, but there's no ring right now because I can't afford a ring, you see, because we don't have enough ammunition to buy a ring. And I mean, this is literally just pathetic. Mark Miley, he should be ashamed of himself. I mean, at what point in time? But the thing is, we've seen the generals in Afghanistan. I mean, the bottom line is the American generalship is over in terms of credibility. They paraded themselves one at a time before U.S. Congress and lied through their teeth about Afghanistan, and now we expect them to tell the truth. I mean, it would be nice if Mark Miley actually stood up and said, hey, Ukraine, you're not going to win. There's literally nothing that can be done. There's nothing we can do. The training we're providing you in combined arms operation is training too few troops in too long of time. You're not going to have enough skilled warriors to take on the Russians who are getting ready to swamp you with a horde that Europe hasn't seen since Genghis Khan. I mean, that would be the truth. But he's not saying that. Yeah, Russia can't win. Really, Mark? I'll tell you what. Why don't you put your salary up against mine and winner take all? Because Russia's going to win. That's the bottom line. And the sad thing is, I mean, I joked about, Ukraine being a jilted suitor. No, Ukraine's dead. Ukraine's going to die because of this nonsense, because of this politicized nonsense. This Jan Stoltenberg doing his, I don't know what kind of drugs he's on when he's doing his little hilty-jilty. I don't like to make fun of people, but I mean, at some point in time, you become a parody of yourself. He does not exude confidence when he speaks. He's not sitting there at the podium staring the audience in the eye, giving them the death gaze saying, we got this thing, we're going in. He's making excuses and he's nervous and he's, oh my God, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. I mean, if you heard him, dissimulate about Sweden and Finland, dude, they're not joining NATO. They're not. Turkey just said, you burned a Koran, it's over. And yet Stoltenberg's, no, I was there in October and they told me they were going to do it. So I'm sticking to that story. What an idiot. But they're all idiots. This is criminal in what's going on. Lloyd Austin speaking is criminal. Very, very rarely do we get some honest people out there that say the truth. I mean, there was a Polish colonel that spoke last week where he said, the Russians are actually pretty good. We're watching them and they're very skilled. They're different than we are. They're actually tougher than we are. We're a little nervous about it. We had an American general come out and say, we can't fight them. We don't have what it takes. We don't have enough. We don't have the skill set. It isn't going to happen. But those truths get diluted with this delusional fantasy that's being put out for political purposes. And I don't know what the politics is here. Who are they trying to fool? And why? It's not as though making up a spring offensive is going to change anything. And yet that's the narrative that they've all bought into. We are giving Ukraine these resources, but they're insufficient, so that they can carry out a spring offensive that isn't going to work. But in order to forestall a Russian offensive, which is happening now, I don't get it. I just don't understand it. But maybe someday, psychologists and sociologists will take this apart and come up with a disease, because I do think that this needs to be categorized as a disease that appears in the handbook of psychological disorders, because there's something going on in NATO right now which is indicative of mental illness, because it's not rational thinking, it's not sanity, it's literally insanity.
Let me give you two things from Afghanistan. And I'm not going to say anything about how they apply to this particular situation, but I'll read them to you. Okay, this is September 1st, 2021. This is a conversation between Joe Biden and the Afghanistan president. Things aren't going well in terms of the fight against the Taliban, and there's a need, whether it's true or not, there is a need to project a different picture. Biden told President Ghani, if you empower Defense Minister Bismillah Khan to execute a strategy focused on key parts of the population center, you're not only going to get more help, but you're going to get a perception that's going to change. So that's number one. Lie, because we need people to believe you. It ain't true. I know it ain't true. You know it ain't true. Lie. But that is in August. Let me read you another story 1 month later. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, same guy he just talked to, has been welcomed to the United Arab Emirates on humanitarian grounds. The UAE government confirmed Wednesday on Sunday Ghani fled Kabul without announcement or known destination. He took with him $169 million in cash. 1 month, Biden saying, we got to tell everybody everything's just fine. Another month, this guy's taken off. Literally, if you look into that story, there was suitcases of cash falling out of the truck as he raced to the plane on the tarmac. I kind of think that's how this thing ends. You know what I mean? That Zelensky, should he be lucky enough to escape with his life, ends up with $169 million in cash along with whatever oligarchs. I mean, am I wrong to compare these two things, Scott?
No, because it's the MO of the United States. And, you know, it always, for instance, when I was doing analysis about Iran, and I was talking about how the United States was manipulating the IAEA and things like that. People kept going, Scott, you have credibility with your UN stuff because you were there, man. But you're not at the IAEA. You're an outsider. So why are you daring to speak as if you know? And I said, well, you know, the tiger don't change its stripes. The United States has a way of operating. It's MO. And it repeats because it's an MO based upon absolute lack of integrity, absolute, commitment to do the wrong thing by what they're supposed to do. So it's actually very easy to say what is the U.S. going to do, because basically take their official statements and flip them 180 degrees, and that's what's actually happening, and that's what they're doing. The United States government doesn't know how to tell the truth because they are in a perpetual business of shaping narrative. And the Ghani story that you brought up about the phone call is that's one of the few times that we've actually seen it laid out. And you know how much attention that got in the media? None. They all continued to play the game of, oh, no, everything's good. Look, training. It's all good, training. All America has to do is provide some airplanes and some bombs, and it'll all be great. And the generals are saying, we will never leave Afghanistan because this is an existential struggle between forces of democracy and the forces of global terror. We must stay, and wham, gone. And now we hear, we must stay in Ukraine, stay the course, because if we don't do this, the evil Russian Empire is going to take, wham, gone. They're going to be gone like that, Ukraine. And you know what's going to happen to you? You're all going to be dead. Maybe a couple people like Zelensky are going to be lucky enough to throw the cash-filled suitcases in a helicopter or a car and get out of the country. But everybody else is going to be left behind. And if you're on the front line right now, you're not preparing for an offensive. You're preparing to die. And let's just bring up one more thing. You know those wonderful Ukrainian tankers that they have getting trained right now? Two things. One, a CNN film crew was in England filming the tankers getting trained on the Challenger 2. And if you look at CNN, they show the tanks moving and the Ukrainian soldiers waving. The out clip was the Ukrainian soldier, see how.
Of course.
And I'm like, he's a Nazi, but they don't want to play. In Germany, the German government actually had to put up a bulletin, the Ministry of Defense in the barracks, saying, hey, Ukrainian students, while you're here, kindly don't put swastikas or iron crosses on the tanks because those are symbols of fascism and we're not comfortable with that. You can do that when you go home, but don't do it here, please. I mean, let's just be frank about what NATO's doing here. They're empowering literal Nazis, and it's not a good look. But again, the media just ignores it. And frankly speaking, if they reported it, I think you'd get a big yawn on the part of most people because they don't know what Nazis are. I mean, all the people who knew Nazis firsthand, the one with the tattoos on their forearm, they're dead or dying. And their children don't seem to be. I mean, there are some instances, but frankly speaking, Israel stuns me, astounds me. The nation that, Yad Vashem, never again, moment of silence, wah, wah, wah. And I'm not making fun of them. Cry, damn it, cry. Because never again means never again. Except it's happening again and you're part of it. You're making it happen. You're letting the same people that killed your grandparents come back into power, into relevance. Why? Because of a little, East-West spat over Russia? Come on, guys, be better than this. Because if you're not, no one's going to care. I'd visit the Holocaust Memorial, in the museum, because I believe in never again. I believe that never again can mankind allow this kind of targeted genocide. And it's not just the Jews. I believe we never again can allow the slaughter of what happened to the Soviet Union, the slaughter of the Polish people, the slaughter of all nations occupied by Nazi Germany. Never again means never again, but it's happening again. So the Holocaust Museum means nothing anymore. Nothing. Just like Auschwitz used to be a symbol of, oh my God, never again. But when they don't allow the Russians to participate in the Holocaust Remembrance Day, it means they've lost the script. They don't know what they're talking about. So I don't care about Auschwitz anymore. I don't care about Yad Vashem. I don't care, because those are empty symbols. In order for them to mean something, never again has to mean something. And never again means not only no more genocide, but no more empowerment of Nazi ideology, which is alive and well and living and thriving in Ukraine right now, thanks to the largesse of the very nations that either were occupied and brutalized by Nazi Germany or the ones that fought them. It's stunning what's happening today. It's just mind-boggling. And I apologize for the rant, but this stuff really bothers me. It really, I've been reflecting on it lately, and I've been talking about it, and I'll just say it one more time. And my parents moved to West Germany in the late 70s. My dad was a career Air Force officer. We were in Germany, and Germany was still occupied. Where I lived, just down the road was the French base. Why were the French in Germany? Because they were occupying Germany. Over here was the American base. Why? Because we were occupying Germany. Down there were the Brits. We were occupying Germany. You go to Berlin, there's all those three powers, plus the Russians. Why? They're occupying Germany. Why were they occupying? Because Germany used to be called Nazi Germany. Very bad people. But they were nice. God, the villages were clean, orderly. You go to the cemeteries and there's a lot of stones that say lost in the East on it because they don't have a body because it's out there, but they put the stone up anyways. And you sort of start to feel sorry for them. But then we lived right across the river, the river from Luxembourg. And so we'd go visit the Luxembourg cemetery. There's a big U.S. cemetery in Luxembourg where the Third Army buried its people. General Patton was initially buried there. And when you go see that cemetery, at first they were just crosses. They didn't mean much. They were crosses, but I've been to cemeteries before, and you're like, okay, wow, a lot of crosses. Then my uncle came to visit, Mel Babcock. Mel Babcock was a chain smoking, quiet man from Kalamazoo, Michigan. Not very spectacular. He worked at Kellogg's. That's what he did. He made cornflakes. He was on the cornflakes line. Just a regular guy. And he came over and he was sort of happy and goofy and everything. And he said, to my parents, could we just go on a little bit of a trip? I'd like to retrace. And this is the first time we found out that Mel Babcock actually was in the U.S. Army in World War II. And he came over the beach in Normandy about 4 days after the invasion. So the bodies were still bobbing, but he didn't have to do the fighting. And he said it was sort of a lark. And when we're driving through France, it's a lark. He's like, hey, I remember this place. They were waving at us. This was a fun place. This was cool. This was nice. Get through Paris, to march through Paris. And then he gets quiet as we approach Belgium and Luxembourg. And then we get to a place, and you can see he's just sort of looking, because, things change over time. But he found it, and we made a turn. And literally he got out, and he fell to his knees and just started crying. Because that was the place his company got ambushed by the German 88s.
Wow.
And they killed 250 of his best friends right there, wham, all dead instantly. And he got away with his life. Now, he's not an infantryman. He's not a frontline fighter. He was in logistics and transportation. Right. But then we went to that cemetery. Those crosses came to life. Those were dead Americans. These were American boys, just like Mel Babcock, I'm sorry, who aren't spectacular, just normal guys. And they came over to liberate Europe from the scourge of Nazi Germany. And they died, they gave their lives, and they're buried in foreign land. And each one of those crosses and stars of David came to life. These were names, they were human beings. And so I don't have any sympathy for anybody that supports the resurgence of Nazi ideology. It's not just that I get mad, I get killing mad. I get brutally mad. I see red because my uncle almost gave his life. I didn't know about it, but now I know about it. And now I know that there's names on the cross that mean something to him, and it has to mean something to me. Never again isn't just about never again for the Holocaust. And never again means I can never forget what happened. I can never forget what happened, because if I do that, I disgrace him. I disgrace every American that came over and fought. And if you're an American watching the show, wake the hell up. Go back and dig into your personal family history and find somebody that came over. Either one of your relatives did or somebody close to your family did. And by sitting here and being silent about what's going on right now in Europe, you are complicit in dishonoring their service. And that's enough. I'm going to calm down because my wife has told me I'm not allowed to get too upset on these podcasts anymore.
I'm with you. I'm with you. But let me say this. I'll tell you who hasn't forgotten: the Russians. And I am of a mind now, one of the things that we've heard from these proposed peace plans always sounds something like this. Sure, you take what you've taken, and of course, we'll remilitarize. We'll just put everything we were going to do. We'll just have a smaller area to do it. We'll put in American bases. We'll do all that. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, sure, you tore Ukraine to pieces, and then ultimately we'll win because the Americans will just come back to Ukraine, renazify, remilitarize, and do everything we would before. I'm of a mind that the Russians might be going all the way to the border. They are not of a mind if their goal is what it is, and they're going to do whatever they need to do, that their thought process is like yours right now. This is an existential threat. We ain't going to fight this again in 5 years. We ain't going to fight this again in 10 years. You backed them into a corner, and they're going to fight. And if as far as they have to go, if it's the English Channel, as far as they have to go to do what they said, which is demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, they're not going to rest until what they see as a threat is neutralized. Yeah.
I mean, look,
I'm not saying they're going to the, I'm saying that for effect. I'm not saying but you know what I'm saying as far as.
I know. Look, Garland, I'm with you 100%. The only caution that I throw out there is that, we can't say that the Russians are the only adults in the room and then start making them filled with human emotion.
Right.
Because human emotion adults have human emotion, but what makes the adult is the ability to keep it suppressed, rise above it, and do the right thing. If the Russians act on pure, like I just did,
they'd be nukes would be flying.
Well, I don't even know about nukes be flying because they're not suicidal.
Yeah, I know what
they would be. Yeah, they would say, there's Odessa, Kharkov, Kiev, the Polish border. Stare the Poles down, dare them to bring it on. They would be doing all that. But now that a year has gone by, you and I talked early on during this thing, and I was of the mind that the Russians were going to steamroll through the Ukrainians. Yeah. I firmly believe that had they gone to war doctrinally, they would have steamrolled through the Ukrainians, but they didn't. And we're all sitting there going, what's going on here? What is this special military operation? Why are they going with hands tied behind their back? What's going on? It turned out that they were the only adults in the room, that they weren't going to war against Ukraine. They were compelled to use military technical means And they think sometimes people listen. This is why I like Ray McGovern, because A, he's older than me and he's wiser than me. And I always yield to Ray McGovern. I may not agree with his conclusions, but I always listen to the man because there's a lot of experience there. And so Ray said, you know, and he gave me this lesson. He said, you got to listen to what they say, Scott. You got to listen to what they say. You don't act on what you think they're saying. Listen to what they say. And Vladimir Putin, and the whole lead up to this thing, kept saying they want a negotiated solution. They don't want to go to war. And when they say military technical solution, that just means you're going to involve the military, but it wasn't war. They didn't mobilize the troops. They used a peacetime, you know, allocation of resources to go to war against one of the largest armies in Europe, on the belief that they could create conditions that would compel the Ukrainians to negotiate a solution that Russia wanted before military. So Russia wasn't going to occupy, destroy. You know, they said demilitarization, denazification, but it's clear now that they were willing to let the Ukrainian military stay intact, and they were willing to let the Zelensky government remain intact. All they were asking is independence for Donbass, and Crimea is Russia, and Ukraine doesn't join NATO. All the things they sort of wanted going in. And so I bring that up because, you know, it's only recently that I realized that this wasn't the game that the Russians were playing. This was their main effort. Their main effort was diplomacy. Their main effort was negotiations. And the reason why I'm highlighting that right now is that's an adult mindset. That's a mature mind. I mean, as Americans, we're not used to it, you know, based upon what we're seeing right now. And so that's why I say right now, you know, you and I can go through our logic, and it is logical. We're not being irresponsible here in terms of saying that the Russians are going to play hardball. But the adults in the room may be looking for an alternative to conflict resolution that doesn't involve them going all the way to Poland, staring the Poles in the eyes, and all this kind of stuff. Because even though that's viscerally attractive to you, me, and maybe most Russians, many Russians I talk to say, yep, that's the only thing we'll accept. Only thing we'll accept, because they're at that point. They're emotional now. But the Russian leadership has not allowed itself to be captured by emotion. They have always had the ability to pull back and look at the things and say, where strategically, what do we want to accomplish? Because frankly speaking, a lot of what they want to accomplish would be adversely impacted by going to the border and staring the Poles in the eyes. I mean, it feels good to do that, but maybe you need to pull back and say, how do we get to where we want to go without creating unnecessary roadblocks? And I always think that's in the back of the Russian leadership's mind. I don't know. Last time I picked up the phone and called Vlad, he didn't answer. So, you know, I don't have insight. I'm just saying that I am learning. Look, and that's the other thing Ray McGovern taught me is you may think you know it all, but you don't. And if you're not always learning and willing to accept the fact that you just don't know everything, then you might as well just quit and get out of the way. I'm learning. I'll be the first one to admit that I'm watching this whole thing. This is like a PhD in Russian area studies. If you want to learn about Russian diplomacy, my God, take a look at what's going on right now. But listen to what they say. Don't listen to what the idiots in the West say. Don't listen to Fiona Hill, Ann Applebaum, all these others out there. Listen to what the Russians say. Listen to what they say, and then impose their words on their actions, and you'll find there's consistency. And once you do that, their genuine direction becomes clear. You go, oh my God, they are serious about diplomacy. Oh my goodness, they are serious about, you know, ratcheting this thing down as you know, in a non-violent fashion. But they're not being allowed to by the West, by NATO, who comes out and again, we just get back to where we started, the fantasy of a decisive Ukrainian counteroffensive in 3 months, as if the Ukrainians are undergoing the equivalent of the Russian mobilization. You know, the one that began back in September, October, December, January, February, 5 months, 300,000, all this equipment coming. And now we expect the Ukrainians, now it's February, March, April, May, So by May, they're going to what? Have the equivalent of this happening? All the equipment coming in, all the training coming in, all the preparations coming in. Guys, this is literal fantasy. It's fantasy, and it's dangerous fantasy because lives are attached to this. And the greatest tragedy is that Ukraine believed that the United States and Europe were their friends. That's the greatest tragedy. Well, like Afghanistan, they're going to find out the hard way that America doesn't care about you. We may talk all the big talk about how we're there for the Afghan people. We're there to, keep the Taliban out of power. We're there for the Afghan women, even, we were told. And then we ran. We ran because we don't care about Afghanistan. We never did. We don't care about the Afghan people. We never will. And sadly for Ukraine, we don't care about you. We will never care about you. We are using you for our own objectives. And when our objectives fail, we're going to fall back and regroup in a way that benefits us. And you're going to be abandoned, living in a wasteland, surrounded by death and destruction. And while you only have yourselves to blame, the United States and Europe are also to blame. It's evil what we're doing. Literal, the definition of evil. Allowing human beings to kill other human beings for reasons that have nothing to do with defending Ukraine and everything to do with pursuing an American policy to weaken Russia. So we're sacrificing Ukrainians for a policy that, frankly speaking, shouldn't exist to begin with. If America was the adult in the room, we should be doing a completely different approach. We should be sitting down with the other adults saying, hey, let's work this out. And you know what? Again, I can't speak for the Russians, but my experience with them is that they are very reasonable people with reasonable expectations. They're not trying to take over the world, unlike somebody else. They're not trying to impose their will on the rest of the world, unlike somebody else. They just want to be a part of the world, a legitimate part of the world. They want to be treated as equals, as people who count. And until we start treating them as equals and treating them as people that count, people of substance, there's going to be a disconnect, and there's going to be more Ukrainians. Now, I'll leave it with this. Stoltenberg. I won't do my imitation because I get in trouble when I do it, but I'm going to do it anyways. We are going to help the people of Georgia and Moldova. My God, if I were Georgia and Moldova, I'd be running as fast away as I could. We don't want your help. No, wave them off. Fly away. Go, go, go. The last thing Georgia and Moldova want is NATO to say, we're your friend. Because what they should do is look at Ukraine and say, if that's how you treat your friends, look at Afghanistan. If that's how you treat your friends, hey, America, remember that Vietnam thing? That's how you treat your friends? The Kurds, that's how you treat your friends? We don't want the friendship.